Thank you. I'm sort of at the opposite spectrum to Devon here. I'd put my level of enthusiasm for predator-free at close to a zero, probably. Honestly, I don't want to see us diverting resources into this sort of crazy stuff. And that's because I just think it's actually the wrong approach to protecting and sustaining our biodiversity. So I've got a couple of points that I want to make on that. So the first one is that we don't need to kill rats, stoats and possums everywhere to save our biodiversity. That's actually not necessary. We can protect our most cherished and vulnerable species in much smaller areas than they once ranged, and that's something that we're very good at. Will that enable us to keep all of our species and ecosystems from the past? No, for me, of course it won't. We don't get to have everything from the past. So as most New Zealanders already recognise, we have to learn to find more middle grounds there. So second, the focus on eradicating just 5 mammal species sets up unrealistic expectations that will prove that this will prove some sort of cure-all for Indigenous biodiversity decline, whereas for me it really won't. These are just a few of a vast suite of tens of thousands of introduced species acting individually and cumulatively to change our ecosystems, to say nothing of other drivers of change. And as we've seen with the arrival of rust myrtle in the last few days, new species will continue to migrate to New Zealand too, whether assisted or otherwise. So we'll have to learn to live with most of these new arrivals and the changes that they'll bring. So it's really reconciliation then, not restoration, that should be our focus. Which leads me finally to number 3. We're fixated on trying to get rid of problematic introductions, on trying to put the environment back to the way it was, when the real threats to life in New Zealand are not from the exotic components of our biodiversity, whether predator or otherwise. They're really from our unsustainable land and resource uses. I think we increasingly spend our time policing and micromanaging wildlife when really we should be focusing on getting our own shit together first. Thank you.
Thank you. Predator-free 2050 is good politics, but it is scientifically flawed. I'm a 10 out of 10 for conservation, but I'm a 0 out of 10 on both counts for predator-free 2050. To support predator-free 2050, you have to be, in the words or phrase of my good colleague here, a science denialist. That is, you have to pretend that 50 years of science and integrated landscape and pest management don't exist. First, New Zealand's and the world's leading experts in mammal eradication have concluded and already published that this is not possible. Second, success rests entirely on solutions with enormous technical and biological uncertainties and substantial social barriers to their use, in particular the genetic modification of wildlife. The chances of their successful application is next to 0. Third, even if you could release a gene drive or Trojan female, they will not eradicate predators because they work against biological evolution. The first example of them failing because of genetic resistance has already been published. Fortunately, there's a better alternative to predator-free 2050. It's based on a better science and a better policy. First, we've proven that it's possible to protect our most vulnerable biodiversity in sanctuaries. Second, we know how to manage habitat around those sanctuaries, the halo, so that it supports greater numbers of our less vulnerable biodiversity. Third, we know how to manage those reserves as a connected national network of biodiversity. Lastly, we already know how to reverse the decline of biodiversity in New Zealand's Indigenous biodiversity in the 67% of New Zealand currently unused for purpose, our rural and urban landscapes. These are possible, achievable, with current technologies and a modest increase in budget, but without the scientific, political and social risks of predator-free 2050. Predator-free 2050 is a political distraction from what ecological science has taught us over the last half-century. It's a distraction from solving the greater environmental problems that we face as a nation. Predator-free 2050 might be really exciting, but it's not rational. Thank you.
To Jamie and Wayne, in light of the position that they're taking, and I want to fully understand the reasons behind. So I heard you say there's higher priorities, too expensive, we should focus on land's agriculture sustainability. I'm not seeing it's an either or, I'm seeing it's a plus. We should be doing both. So a question to both Jamie and Wayne. So we're at a stage tomorrow where we've actually got the technology to eradicate possums, rats and stoats, and all we have to do is push the button. Would you push the button?
Wayne, the microphone's down your end, so...
No. I wouldn't push the button. Now, you might. I would want a whole lot more information from the rest of my community, my diverse community, about whether that's what they want. I wouldn't assume. I want to talk a moment about absolutionism. All of what has been described here is all good stuff. What's at issue here is absolutionism. The fact that you package it as predator-free 2050 and absolute eradication, which not only is unachievable, but two people here have acknowledged that it's unachievable, but they support it because it's jingoism. It's absolutionism and it's jingoism. I want our conservation to be meatier than that. I want it to engage with the complexity of ecological science and social science. I want it to engage with our communities at more than a jingoistic level. We're smart people. We don't have to engage in the sort of militaristic jingoism that we seem to be doing. We have a smart community. They know about integrated pest management. They're farmers. They're people managing their gardens in cities. I'm a little bit disappointed with how simplistic our conservation community engages with this problem. There's no room for absolutionism here. There's room for smart thinking and doing. And we're already doing most of it. You're doing a great job. Scale it up, coordinate with each other, throw out the slogans, and just get on with what you're already doing very well. Just do it better. And use the bonus that is new incremental technologies, just as that, a bonus. I've seen a lot of really exciting new ideas here today, and they will be incremental improvements on what we can do now, and they'll be excellent, but we don't need the jingoism.
Okay, while the microphone moves to Jamie, he was asked to respond, and then there's a questioner down here somewhere who wants to ask a question.
And by the way, my question was on the assumption we've been through consultation, involvement, engagement with iwi, the community. So would you push the button, Jamie?
I really like what Wayne had to say on that. Yeah, again, I really support the idea that our conservation needs to be based around the multiple different views in this space. And I mean, a couple of the people here seem to epitomise that to me, that they're engaged in initiatives that are on a local level are very highly valued by those local people, and they've got really good engagement from them, and that's fantastic. It's another thing altogether to take that and decide that it must be the case across the entire country. And as Wayne said, I'm really concerned with a lot of the militaristic terminology that's used in this space, because that seems to indicate that the government or enlightened scientists or others will decide that they know better than people and that they're going to try to push home a particular value or a particular idea about how they believe the environment should be. And that concerns me, because I do think that conservation needs to be considered more on a case-by-case basis and on an area-by-area basis. And again, it's one thing to get these great successes in small areas and that are unique to specific communities, and another thing altogether to try to do it everywhere.
Okay, a question down the back, and we are running out of time, so
Okay. Yeah, that previous question, I was going to ask a variation, and Wayne's already answered from his perspective, so I'll just ask Jamie. If the goal was changed to more of the intermediate point of improving pest control over large areas in a cost-effective manner, but not whole of New Zealand, do you think current use of money is well spent in that direction?